My name is Dwight Bartholomew. I was born in May 24th, 1952. I was born in Fayetteville at the Washington Regional Hospital.
Okay, and we want to be sure that we have your permission to use this interview for the Prairie Grove Oral History Project.
Yes, you have my permission.
And tell me, Dwight, who are your parents?
My parents was Arjo Cletus Bartholomew and Emma Bell Carney.
And tell me about your siblings.
Well, I had an older brother and an older sister, Phyllis. It was a girl's name, and my brother was Billy Joe.
Okay. Tell me about your family's business when you were growing up as a child.
Well, our business we was in the farming business and also in the Washington County Livestock Auction in Fayetteville.
Okay, tell me more about your family business.
Well, we had a livestock auction that we did on Saturday when I was young, and I was just helping move the cattle and hogs through the ring to where the auctioneer could sell them. And then the farming side of it, we just put up hay and oats and wheat and farmed with cows and calves. That's about it.
Do you remember, what's your earliest memories of the livestock auction? How long did your family have that business?
My grandpa was one of the co-founders of that livestock auction in 1936. Is the first year it started.
And what was his name?
William Bill Bartholomew.
Okay, and did you always work at the livestock auction to help since you were a little kid?
Yes, I worked there from the start when I was about 6 years old, working at the livestock auction.
Tell me more, what would you do?
Well, when I first started, I was in charge of checking in the hogs. When the people back up and unload their hogs, I'd write down their name and their address, and then somebody else. I was just a little kid, just barely could write, but I'd write down their name and address and give them a receipt for they had 4 sows and 2 boars and 3 pigs or whatever they had, and then give them their copy, and the other copy would go to the office, and that's how their checks got made out.
And tell me about your farming business. I know y'all had a lot of farms out here on this end of the county. Tell me about that.
Well, our farms were just basically just cow and calves was most of what we did, and like we just put up hay for them. So it was just feed hay in the winter time and put it up in the summer and chop the ice, and that's about it. Doctor the sick ones.
Where did you live when you were a kid?
I lived in Rogers Street here in Prairie Grove.
Tell me what it was like growing up as a kid in Prairie Grove. What do you remember? What are your earliest memories of growing up in Prairie Grove?
Well, when I was a kid, the Prairie Grove was small little community. Everyone knew everyone. And I'd walk downtown. We lived about 2 blocks from Main Street, and I'd walk downtown when I was 5 years old, and that's just well, it wasn't much going on, back in those days, and it was everyone knew everyone, and it was a peaceful little old town.
Tell me about your parents.
Well, my dad was, he started, I guess he left home when he was about 13 and went to work in Prairie Grove. He was born and raised in Strickler, and he went to work for one of his older brothers down here at the store in town, a grocery store. And then from there on, he just saved his money and got help. Of course, his dad had the sale barn at the time, so then he started working up there a little bit, and then he just grown into the cattle business from that direction,
What about your mom? What would she do around the house? What kind of things would she do to help out?
Well, my mother, she was in charge of all the cooking, of course, and the cleaning and raising the kids, and that was her main job, and that was a full-time job, I'm sure, raising 3 of us. But
what were some of the chores y'all would do around the house to help out?
Well, Dad had when we lived here in town, Dad had a milk cow out there that he milked the cow in the morning, and of course we'd have to help do some of that stuff. They raised a big garden, and Mom canned all that stuff, and all kind of vegetables, even canned sausage, and I carried the trash out and mowed the yard, and that kind of stuff. Pick weeds and weed the garden. And
So y'all worked hard from a young age?
oh yeah, Dad believed in starting young and working hard all the time.
What other jobs did you work in Prairie Grove to make cash money?
When I was young, only extra thing I did, I guess, I picked up pop bottles a little bit here and there and take down to the grocery store and get that 2 cents a bottle for them. And that's the rest of the time Dad had me busy doing something. I was riding the tractor when I was about 7 or 8, raking hay and that kind of stuff. So that's the only job I ever had, I guess, was doing that.
So you stayed busy with the family business?
Yeah, family business was all about.
Tell me about some of your family routines, like going to church and having people over for dinner and stuff like that. What were some of the things y'all did as a family together?
Well, we went to church every Sunday, and I had to go to youth group, of course, Sunday night. That was a big deal back then, and there was probably 35 or 40 of us at the church, it's Methodist church, going to youth, and of course we went to Sunday school, and that was every week, every week deal. That was just part of life. And
what are some of your earliest memories of downtown Prairie Grove? Some of the businesses you might have frequented when you were young?
Well, when I was young, Mama let me go downtown a lot of time on Saturday and give me a quarter, and I could go to the movies down there. And you go get in for the movies and get something to eat and drink both for that quarter. And I remember a lot of the old timers sitting down there in front of some of the parts stores or pool halls or whatever it was down there, playing their guitars and banjos and stuff on the main street there on Saturdays, and that was quite interesting for me.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I don't know how to start that.
Who are some of the ones maybe you remember?
Well, I can't remember any of the guys that were actually there. I didn't know none of them, their faces were familiar to me, but like I say, I was just, real young, 5, 6, 7 years old. And when that was going on, and a little older too, so I don't remember none of their names, but most of them were just old timers, what I called them then. But
just come to town to hang out?
They played good music, I remember that. I enjoyed it at a young age listening to them.
Were they still doing the trades day when you were a kid?
Yes, yeah, we had trades day. It was, I don't know where it was ever Saturday or once a month or what, but I remember my grandma going to it all the time. That was a big deal, save those little tickets, and they'd draw their names, and the town would be plumb full of people.
Now you went to Fayetteville for the livestock auction. How often did people go to Fayetteville back in those days? Was it?
Well, I don't think when they went to the livestock auction, if you lived in Prairie Grove area, for example, a lot of people, they didn't come to Fayetteville but maybe once a week, and some of them just once a month, maybe to bring their cattle up there and sell them, and that was a long ways, 12 miles from Prairie Grove to Fayetteville. So, of course, time went on, that changed, but a lot of them, I'm sure, didn't go but once a month, probably.
Did you get to know a lot of people at the livestock auction? What was that like working there all those years as a kid?
Well, yeah, when I worked at the livestock auction, there was just these people from all over brought their animals there from Madison County, and just there was a lot of people, and over the years you got a lot of relationships that you built up with those old timers, and some of my best memories were some of the older guys. That was, I was amazed at a lot of them. There was a guy named Noe Latham. He was the sheriff over in Madison County for years and years. I got to know him when I was probably 14 or 16 because he was a lot older than me. He was older than my dad a lot, but he was a real interesting character, and he had a lot of stories to tell back in there. It was pretty rough back in those days, apparently over there.
Tell me about going to school in Prairie Grove.
Well, in Prairie Grove schools, it was pretty small. I can't remember how many was in my class when I was young, of course, because when we graduated, it was about 50 in the class. But there again, everyone knew everyone. It was just about everybody, even the classes that's 3 or 4 years older than you knew them or their brother or something. It was just a small town atmosphere, and it was pretty neat, and my mom knew most of the teachers, and it was just pretty neat growing up in that kind of environment.
Tell me about some of your classmates and friends at school.
Well, my classmates, when I was in school, had of course, boys and girls both, but a lot of them was not my neighbors, that lived right behind us, and down the street, I don't know, it was just, there again, it was just a small time atmosphere.
Who were some of the teachers that you remember?
Well, the teacher I remember the most, I guess, would have been Miss Rogers. She was my 5th grade teacher, and everyone was scared to death of her, but as time has told, she taught most everybody a lot, because she was so strict on you getting your homework and all that stuff. Everybody's scared to death of her, so you got your homework done, and it was, I learned a lot from her, and it was a blessing that I had her.
What are any stories you can remember from high school that you could tell? What about sports? Were you involved in sports?
Well, yeah, I played a little bit of sports. I played basketball and some football, but I didn't get to finish that. I hurt my back pretty bad, pulled a lot of muscles in it when I was a junior, and that was the end of the sports world for me, but I enjoyed a lot of it.
Tell me about some of the people that you remember, some of the older folks in Prairie Grove, the adults you remember.
Let's see. I remember when I was young going downtown, there's another guy that was named Opal Stevens. He sold apples, and he was a peddler, and he was always sitting down on Main Street down there. Had a little blue and white pickup. He sold apples and peaches out of it, and apparently that's what he had done, what his dad had done. But I remember him telling me when I was young about Pretty Boy Floyd robbing the bank when he was a young kid. And he was supposed to have robbed the Farmers and Merchants Bank sometime, I don't know when. Of course, like I said, I was young when he was telling me that, and he was real young when that happened. So,
what are some of the stores and businesses that you remember doing business with? You've talked about some of them, but tell me more.
See, some of the stores in town there that I remember going in and out of, there was an IGA down there that I think Guy Sparks and Ronnie Stone ran that store. And then there was a B&K supermarket, and that was Hubert Keene and my Uncle Jack Bartholomew run that store. And then Crescent Department Store, it's still there today, Crescent is, and a guy named Skelton run it when I was young. Elton Skelton was his name, and besides that, Neil's Dry Goods, there was another clothing store in town. Their last name were Neil. That's the only ones I can remember.
What are some of the changes you've seen over the years in Prairie Grove? Like in the downtown area?
Well, in the downtown area, in Prairie Grove, the changes is just the traffic, was coming through there. It just turned to lots of traffic, and back in those days, you just hardly see a car go up Main Street. When I was young, you just walk across there, and seemed like everybody's in a big hurry today. Back then, it wasn't much.
What did you and other kids your age do when you were growing up? What would y'all do for fun?
Well, I guess when our youth group was real active in our church, and so we would go to the movies, seemed like about once a month to Fayetteville. Some of the parents would take us up there. or we'd go to the big swimming pool at Fayetteville up there at the park, and cookouts at the church and play volleyball, and just most of the things we did was involved with that group that I ran with.
Tell me about your parents. What would your parents and other adults their age do for fun back when you were a kid?
All I remember my parents doing for enjoyment was they played a lot of cards with their neighbors, and they went on picnics out on the river and cook out and played cards maybe once a week with some of their friends and family and couples. That's about all they did for entertainment.
What about the Battlefield Park? Did you ever use that much when you were a kid? What do you remember about the Battlefield Park?
Well, when I was in the third grade, I believe it was third grade, the Battlefield Park started the square dancing. And I was in the first wave of that, and I remember there was like 6 or 8 groups at that time, and I danced until I graduated high school. And there was a lot of clothesline fair then. Back those days, they had quilts hanging on the fence everywhere, and that was really got its name, I guess, a clothesline fair. But there was lots of arts and crafts there, and playground and all that.
Talk about, do you remember who started the square dancing and how that grew from just a few people doing it to such a huge tradition?
I guess the square dancing started, the Lions Club must have been big backers of that, because when I got old enough to know, the Lions Club was real active in promoting that and sponsoring it. So I don't know who would have started it, but the Lions Club, I guess, has to get all the credit for it that I know of, getting that started and going. And from there on, it just kind of seemed like it ran itself. But,
well, tell me about the Lions Club. That's a real active group in Prairie Grove. Have you been involved with them over the years?
Yeah, I've been a member of the Lions Club from when I was probably 16, I guess, or so. As young as you could join it, is when I joined, and then we did all kind of activities up there at the Battlefield Park, sponsored all the concession stands and helped organize all that. And we used to cook chicken down there, about 1,100. I think we cooked about 1,100 chicken halves to serve up there on Saturday and Sunday on my Labor Day weekend. And
who were some of the others that you remember being active in the club that you got to know?
Oh, let's see. When I was in the Lions Club, the Parks brothers, Barry and Donald, was active in it. Of course, they was older members, and of course my father was in it, and my brother, and Paul Jones, and Howard Fiddler, and a lot of older guys was helping, do all that stuff. And of course, some of the younger generation, Rick Reed was involved in it real heavy, and still is.
Who are some of the local business leaders that you remember? You mentioned a couple of that from the past, like Paul Jones and Howard Fiddler. Who are some of the ones you remember?
I see some of the business guys in town that I remember. I guess starting at the old Southern Mercantile down there, Florence Hill was running that thing when I was real young, and Jack's Barbershop was there in town. Jack McClellan ran the barbershop, and there was another across the street that a guy named Weeks, he was a barber there. And then Carmen Drugstore, Lex Carmen, I believe was his name, had that. And then the Bells, and I can't remember what the other guy's name is, had the Sterling Drugstore.
What about the guys at the bank? Do you remember any of those?
I see the Farmers and Merchants Bank. I remember Delford Reef was the president, and then of course Jim, his son, was one of the loan officers there, and there was Rick Reed was a loan officer there during the time, and Rick Burden and Jenny Stinchcomb worked there, and I can't remember.
What other stories about Prairie Grove can you think of that you might want to tell?
I guess the old feed mill on the south side of Prairie Grove there, which is about 2 blocks south of Main Street, it was still doing a lot of business when I was young, and apparently back in before my time in the 30s and 40s, apparently it was an enormous structure for those days, and they handled a lot of feed went through there. The train come by there, but it was still doing a lot of business there when I was young. They're still milling feed, and the train wasn't coming by there anymore, but they were still doing lots of business there.
Do you remember the canning factory? Was it still in operation when you were a kid?
Yeah, we had a canning factory. There also kind of across from where the feed mill was. It was called Kelly Canning Factory, and they canned tomatoes there and strawberries. I think was their 2 big things they canned. And that went on for years and years. People hauled those things in there from everywhere to get canned. And there were a lot of people I remember working there when I'd go down there with my mother to pick up some of that stuff when I was young.
So would you go down there as a customer then to buy things, or would you go to sell tomatoes, or what would you?
Yeah, we would go down there to the canning factory and buy either canned tomatoes that is canned, or they've had strawberries that are already picked and canned also with sugar on them, so we just went down there to buy stuff there is what we did.
Tell me about the tradition in Prairie Grove where all the old guys go down to the one stop to visit. I mean, how long has that been going on, and what's that all about? Just tell me about that.
Well, from the time I was young, like the little restaurants in Prairie Grove, like one was called the Dairy Queen, I guess, when I was real young in my teens. The old timers you'd see them down there drinking coffee in the morning, and I wasn't part of that group. But then as time went on, that one became the Beehive, and then it was always, some place where they hang out and told all the old stories. And currently it's the One Stop is one that they handle, serve breakfast and lunch there, and a lot of the coffee drinkers go in, a lot of the old timers, and tell stories and stuff about their family and what went on back in the day.
Now tell me about who owns that store and kind of who some of the people that hang out there are, because it's part of your family, right?
Yeah. My nephew, Dwight Bartholomew, bought the One Stop several years ago, and he's running it and managing it. And he's like I said, they serve breakfast, dinner, and lunch, and dinner also most days. And a lot of my friends and family hang out in there, and we have breakfast in there in the morning a lot of times, and have lunch, and just have fellowship with your friends. And Warren appears at our table there. Warren appears sits there, and John Everett, and
what do y'all tell me some of the things y'all talk about?
Some of our conversations are to One Stop are just do about how much rain we got, because most all of us have some farm structure. We've got some few cattle or something, and we talk about the moisture and the snow and whatever is happening in the weather, and just area news about houses being built, how fast town's growing, and businesses coming and going out of town. That's mainly the conversations. A little bit of sports.
Where else do they hang out and talk in Prairie Grove? For example, sometimes they go down to Larry Crawley's. Is that also kind of a hangout?
Yeah, there's another hangout in Prairie Grove. It's down at the Larry Crawley's parts store. There's a pretty good crew comes in there early in the morning, drinks coffee. I think Larry makes about 3 gallons of coffee a day for them, but they have to all drink on. But there's a pretty good crew hangs out there. 2 or 3 different shifts comes through there. Lots of stories down there too.
What about the old Colonial? Wasn't that a big hangout back in its day?
Yeah, the Colonial Courts, before it closed, was a great big hangout, and my sister and brother and them, they even hung out there when they were young, had a little pool table in there, and it was a kind of a real hangout back in those days, in the 50s and the 60s, but it closed a few years ago, but it was a real neat little place.
Anything else? Oh, if somebody said, tell me something, what can you tell me about your little town of Prairie Grove? What's it like? What would you tell them?
I guess I'd have to tell them that, it's a wonderful place Prairie Grove is a wonderful place to live and raise your family.